My name is Arthur Pendelton. I am 54 years old and live in a house where time stands still, beneath Seattle's infamous, bone-chilling gray rain. People say life is full of surprises, yet my life has been as predictable and relentless as the ticking of a clock until today. At exactly 4:45 a.m., I opened my eyes before hearing the alarm's metallic screech. My body wakes before my mind. Knowing Leo needs me is a stronger urge than my biological clock. It's been this way for 7 years. To avoid waking my wife, Elena, I tiptoed out of bed like a thief. Even the creak of the parquet floorboards could be considered a crime in this house. As I went down to the kitchen to put the coffee on, the heavy silence of the house settled on my shoulders. This silence was not peace. It was waiting. The smell of coffee filling my nostrils, I headed for Leo's room. When I opened the door, that familiar smell hit me. Antiseptic solutions, lavender oil, and the metallic taste of hopelessness. I opened the curtains, and the gray morning light fell on my 18-year-old son's pale face. Leo clung to the safe harbor of his dreams, as if he didn't want to wake up. "Good morning, champ," I whispered. I hated the fake cheerfulness in my voice. "Even if the sun doesn't rise, we do, right?" Leo opened his eyes. In those eyes, there was not the liveliness of a young man, but the resignation of an old man. "Good morning, Dad," he said. His voice cracked. "My legs, they feel heavier today." I lifted the blanket. Those legs, which had once chased after soccer balls, now lay lifeless on the bed like two lumps. That cursed day 7 years ago, the day he fell down the school stairs, damaged his spinal cord, and the doctors said, he has no feeling below the waist, limited mobility. That day was our apocalypse. As I picked him up and transferred him to his wheelchair, Leo's lighter body hurt me inside. For a father, the lightening of his son's weight is the heaviest burden in the world. We went to the bathroom. Special grab bars, non-slip flooring, a shower chair. This bathroom resembled a hospital ward more than a home. As I scrubbed his back, the life I once had flashed before my eyes. Pendelton Restoration Workshop. That shop where I gave life to old cars, polished rusty metal. After Leo's accident, I didn't hesitate. I sold the shop, the motor oil stains on my hands faded, but the desire to fix things in my heart never faded. The only thing I couldn't fix anymore was my son. "Dad," Leo said, the sound of the water filling the silence between us. "Can we go down to the pier after therapy? I want to watch the seagulls." "Of course, Leo," I said, preparing the towel. "If Dr. Vance gives the okay, we'll go to the ends of the earth." When I dressed him and brought him to the dining room, Elena had already taken her place at the head of the table. With her flawless makeup, ironed outfit, and tablet in hand, she seemed more like the manager of this house than its mother. She had been the family's financial pillar since I quit my job. She was a senior executive at an international logistics firm and covered Leo's expensive medications and endless therapy sessions. This reality had irrevocably shifted the balance of power between us. Without looking at us, she said, "Coffee's ready." Her voice was as clear and cold as a piece of ice. "Good morning, Mom," said Leo, his voice tinged with that familiar desire for approval. "I have my 3-month checkup with Dr. Vance today." Elena's fingers froze on the tablet. She looked at us over her glasses. That look held more of a chess player's calculation than a mother's compassion. "Today? It was scheduled for next week on my calendar." "No, today, Elena," I said, placing the fried egg on her plate. I wrote it down in the kitchen. Elena frowned slightly. I have an important board meeting. I can't come. No problem. We'll manage, I said. It's not the first time we've gone alone. The clatter of cutlery at the breakfast table tried to drown out the noise of unspoken words. Elena suddenly placed her phone on the table. What are you going to do after the appointment? Leo wants to go down to the pier, I said, feeling Leo's hopeful gaze on me. A little sea air would do him good. Absolutely not, Elena said, her voice suddenly hardening. Dr. Vance says he needs to rest after every checkup. The wind, the humidity. Arthur's immune system is weak. Don't you know that? Leo's shoulders slumped. But Mom, I feel fine, he interjected. I haven't been out of the house in weeks. This is not up for debate, Leo, Elena said, not raising her voice but sharpening her tone. I can't gamble with your health. Do you want to risk paralysis for a moment of whim? The sentence landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. I felt the anger inside me as Arthur rising. Elena, we're keeping the child in a glass case. Dr. Hayes said last week that fresh air is essential for mental health. Elena pushed her chair back, the parquet floor creaking painfully. Who pays the bills for this house? That wheelchair? That special bed, Arthur? Your paternal instincts don't cover the expenses. Don't question my decisions. My pride, that painful lump in my throat, silenced me again. Arguing in front of Leo was the worst thing I could do to him. I looked away. Fine, I said. We'll go straight home. Elena smiled like a victorious commander, grabbed her bag, and kissed Leo's hair as she left. For your own good, dear. Promise we'll watch a movie at home this weekend. When the door closed and the sound of the engine faded away, Leo turned to me. Dad, why is Mom always like this? She's just trying to protect you, Leo, I said, telling a lie I didn't even believe myself. She has too much responsibility. As I loaded the dishes into the dishwasher, the feeling of unease inside me grew. Something about this house, this routine, Elena's overly protective attitude bothered me. But at that moment, I didn't know it was just the first gust of a storm that would turn our lives upside down. We got ready and left the house. As I put Leo in the car, I wanted to rekindle that faded light in his eyes. If the doctor says good things, I said, winking, maybe on the way back we'll accidentally pass by that famous ice cream shop. Leo smiled. I would have given the world for that smile. When we arrived at the hospital, a surprise awaited us. The woman at the reception desk said Dr. Vance was out of town due to an urgent family matter. In his place, said the receptionist, our new specialist, Dr. Silas Thorne, will see you. He is one of the country's best in spinal cord injuries. At that moment, I couldn't know that this change was not a trick of fate, but a blessing. Heading into the unknown, I began pushing the wheelchair toward the new doctor's office. Dr. Silas Thorne's office was very different from Dr. Vance's pastel-colored room, which smelled of artificial flowers. This place contained order within chaos. The walls were covered with anatomical drawings, and the air held that sharp scent of old books mixed with strong coffee. Dr. Thorne, in his mid-50s, rose from behind his desk with disheveled gray hair and piercing eyes reminiscent of a hawk. His handshake was firm and reassuring, but I sensed an analytical ability in his eyes that unsettled me. Mr. Pendelton and Leo, he said, his voice deep and gravelly. I've taken over your case in Dr. Vance's absence. Frankly, your case has piqued my interest. Leo shrank slightly in his wheelchair. The new doctor's direct manner lacked the fake, nice doctor mask he was used to. Pleased to meet you, sir, Leo said timidly. Well, let's not waste time, said Dr. Thorne, placing the file on the table. Leo, you are 18 years old. Trauma to the lumbar region 7 years ago. Complete loss of movement and sensation since that day. Is that correct? Yes, doctor, I replied, speaking for Leo. Dr. Vance has been closely monitoring the process. Dr. Thorne gave me a brief, unreadable look before turning back to Leo. Let's move to the examination table, young man. I'll take a look at those legs of yours. While helping me transfer Leo, Dr. Thorne's professionalism caught my attention. Unlike Dr. Vance, however, Thorne wasn't just performing routine checks. He touched Leo's soles with a metal rod, carefully examined the tendons under his kneecaps, and squeezed his calves to measure muscle tone. At that moment, I noticed the doctor's eyebrows slightly furrowed. This was a sign that something was wrong, or conversely, that he had found something unexpected. Mr. Pendleton, Thorne said, without taking his eyes off Leo, do you have your wife's latest test results and MRI reports with you? Yes, Apache said, handing him the thick envelope Elena had thrust into my hand that morning. Elena's always organized. Everything's in there. Dr. Thorne took the envelope, pulled out the documents, and began comparing them to the old films pinned to the lightboard. The silence in the room was like a stretched violin string. It felt as if it could snap at any moment. The doctor's gaze shifted between the papers and Leo's legs. The expression on his face went from seriousness to pure astonishment, then to dark suspicion. Then he suddenly turned to me. Mr. Pendleton, as a matter of procedure, I conduct a brief private interview with my adolescent patients in the context of confidentiality. If it's okay with you, could you wait in the hallway for 5 minutes? This request surprised me. In 7 years, no doctor had ever wanted to speak with Leo alone. Is there a problem, doctor? I asked, a vague fear taking root in my heart. It's just a routine procedure, he said, but his tone of voice screamed that it wasn't routine. Please give us a moment. When I stepped into the hallway, the hospital smell made me nauseous. The minutes felt like hours. I couldn't hear the whispers behind the door, but my mind had already begun to conjure up the worst-case scenarios. Had Leo's condition worsened? Or had we made a mistake by bringing him out, as Elena feared? 10 minutes later, the door opened and Dr. Thorne called me in. Leo's face was chalk white, his eyes filled with a horror and confusion I couldn't comprehend. Is everything okay? I blurted out, rushing to Leo's side. Sit down, Mr. Pendleton, said Dr. Thorne. His voice was now not only serious, but also icy. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want honest answers. This is vital to your son's life. Of course, I said, my voice trembling. What do you want to know? The accident 7 years ago. Did you ever see the original trauma reports or the first x-rays with your own eyes? Or did you get all the information from Dr. Vance and your wife? I don't understand those things, I stammered. Elena is familiar with medical terms. Dr. Vance is also a family friend. I trusted them. Dr. Thorne nodded as if he had received the answer he was expecting. Then he approached the illuminated board and pointed to a film. Mr. Pendleton, you need to listen to what I have to say calmly. There are medically inexplicable inconsistencies between what your wife's reports say and your son's physical condition. What do you mean? My breath caught in my throat. The doctor leaned toward me over the desk, his voice reduced to a whisper, but each word hit like a sledgehammer. Don't go to that house tonight. Take your son and go somewhere safe, somewhere no one knows, and call the police as soon as possible. The world slipped away beneath my feet. The police, why? Is Leo in danger? I can't say more right now. I have things to prove, Thorne said, his eyes drifting toward the door. But as a doctor, I'm telling you, your son's diagnosis, that diagnosis may be based on a lie, Arthur. And those who perpetuate it won't like the truth coming out. He thrust a hastily scribbled prescription and a business card with his personal number into my hand. I made it look like a prescription for painkillers. Tell your wife that. But only call this number when you're safe. Now leave here as if nothing happened. As I walked down the hospital corridor with Leo, I couldn't stop my legs from trembling. Dr. Thorne's words echoed in my mind. That diagnosis might be based on a lie. The short distance from the hospital to the parking lot felt like a tunnel stretching for miles. As I opened the car door to help Leo transfer, I tried to hide the trembling in my hands. Dr. Thorne's words, "That diagnosis may be based on a lie," echoed in my mind like a broken record. Each word shattered our 7 years of pain, acceptance, and sacrifice. I started the car. The engine's roar couldn't drown out the heavy silence between us. I looked at Leo in the rearview mirror. He had his head pressed against the window, watching outside, but his gaze was blank. At that moment, I felt that not only my son's legs, but also his soul had been numbed. "Dad," he said suddenly, his voice hoarse, "I feel strange." "How strange?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Are you in pain?" "No, not pain. It's like I'm underwater. Sounds are coming from far away. That pill the nurse gave me when I was talking to Dr. Thorne. It made me really dizzy." I hit the brakes harder than I should have. The car shook slightly. "Which pill, Leo? Which nurse?" Leo turned his tired eyes to me. "While you were outside with the doctor. She was wearing a blue apron. She said Dr. Thorne sent it for my pain. A small white pill." A cold lump formed in my stomach. Dr. Thorne had only given me a prescription, and it was fake. He hadn't sent any medication. Who was that nurse? Or more importantly, what was that pill? "It's okay, son. Just rest a little," I said, trying to suppress the panic in my voice. "It'll pass when we get home." When we arrived home, the driveway was empty. Elena hadn't returned yet. Under normal circumstances, this would have reassured me, but now even the emptiness of the house felt threatening. I carried Leo inside. The sterile, orderly state of the house no longer looked like a refuge to me, but like a perfectly designed stage set. Everything was in its place. The furniture, the knickknacks, the smiling family photos in their frames. But it was all fake. It was all there to hide a lie. I laid Leo down on the sofa in the living room. His eyes were closing. "Get some sleep, champ," I said, covering him with a blanket. I went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water, but the dryness in my throat wouldn't go away. Just then I heard the front door open. Heels echoed on the parquet floor. Elena. She didn't usually come home from work before 7 in the evening. I looked at the clock. It was only 2 in the afternoon. My heart was pounding in my chest. "You're home early," Elena said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. Her voice was controlled as usual, but in her eyes there was a sharpness, a scanning quality I'd never noticed before. Was she scrutinizing me? "We finished quickly at the hospital," I said, turning away and swirling the glass so she wouldn't see my face. Dr. Vance wasn't there. The air in the kitchen suddenly turned cold. I sensed Elena pause. "He wasn't there. He scheduled the appointment. So who saw you?" "A new doctor. Dr. Thorne," I said, turning to him. I tried to keep my face as expressionless as possible. "He just did routine checks. He said everything was the same." Elena placed her purse on the marble counter. "Even in this movement, There was tension. Dr. Thorne? I've never heard of him. What did he say? Did he change any medications? He just renewed the painkillers, I said, pulling the fake prescription Dr. Thorne had given me out of my pocket and placing it on the table. This was my first move. Elena reached for the prescription, her eyes scanning the paper quickly. I saw her shoulders drop slightly, her tension easing. She relaxed. Why? Because she thought the doctor didn't suspect anything. Good, she said, her voice returning to its old softness. Where's Leo? He's inside, sleeping. He said he was very tired. A shadow passed over Elena's face. She hurried into the living room. I followed her. She stood over Leo, placing her hand on his forehead. Was that touch a mother's tenderness? Or a guard checking on a prisoner? I couldn't tell anymore. He took his medicine, she murmured, almost to herself. What did you say? I asked, pretending not to have heard. Elena flinched, turned to me, and put on that perfect smile of hers. I'm talking about his medication. It's very important that he takes it regularly. The fatigue is normal. His body is fighting, Arthur. You know that. His body is fighting. That sentence had been a refrain I'd heard for years. But now, after Dr. Thorne's words, I wondered what Leo's body was fighting. The disease, or what was being given to him. That evening's dinner was pure torture. Elena was trying to seem happier than usual. She talked about a project at work, laughed, made weekend plans with Leo. I, on the other hand, was picking at my food. I looked at the woman across from me, the wife I had shared 20 years with, and saw a stranger. What was she hiding under that flawless makeup? What kind of heart was beating inside that expensive suit? My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. I peeked under the table. The number wasn't saved, but I knew who it was. I got your son's blood test results. The situation is more complicated than we thought. Bring him to me tomorrow morning. Alone. Make up an excuse. I quickly put the phone back in my pocket. Elena was looking at me. Who was that? She asked, her fork suspended in midair. An unnecessary advertising message, said for car insurance. Elena smiled, but her eyes didn't. You're very interested in your phone these days, Arthur. This sentence wasn't a simple observation. It was a warning. At that moment, I realized that we weren't the only ones living in this house. The walls had ears, the mirrors had eyes, and I had fallen right into the middle of a spy game in my own home. When night fell, I stared at the ceiling in the darkness of our bedroom. Elena was breathing steadily beside me. Was she asleep, or was she also listening to me in the dark? I fought the urge to get up, grab Leo, my son, and run away. But where to? Without evidence, without a plan, any move I made would wake Elena and put Leo in even greater danger. I had to wait. Until morning. Whatever that complex thing Dr. Thorne had found was, I had to play this role until I found out. But that voice inside me, that paternal instinct was screaming, run. Take your son and run without looking back. 3:00 a.m. The silence of the house was no longer a weight, but a threat. I listened to Elena's steady breathing in the bed next to me. That sound, which had brought me peace for 20 years, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Dr. Thorne's message flashed in my mind like a red neon sign. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't lay my head on this pillow for another second without knowing the truth. I pulled the blanket off me inch by inch. Even the faint rustle as I got out of bed sounded like an explosion to me. Elena stirred, and I held my breath. "Arthur?" she murmured sleepily. "Water," I whispered, praying my voice wouldn't tremble. "My throat is dry, you sleep." She turned over and went back to sleep. I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand and left the room. Walking down the hallway, I felt like a ghost in my own home. My destination wasn't the kitchen, but Elena's study. It wasn't forbidden to enter, but Elena's private space was always surrounded by an invisible boundary. I opened the door quietly. Inside, it smelled of Elena's expensive perfume and paper. Moonlight hit the polished mahogany desk, dividing the room into gray and black shadows. I went behind the desk. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew where to find it. Elena kept everything under control, even her darkest secrets. The third drawer. I knew there was a spare key there, under the old bills. I had seen it by chance one day years ago, but I hadn't thought about it at the time. My hands trembling, I lifted the pile of papers. I felt the coldness of the metal on my fingertips. The key was there. The click sound that came when I opened the locked file cabinet echoed like a scream in the silence of the night. I froze. I listened to the hallway. There was no sound. I quickly began scanning the files: taxes, investments, property deeds, and at the back, a blue folder thicker than the others. Leo, medical private. I opened the folder and shone my phone's light on it. The first pages were standard hospital bills. But as I turned the pages, the ice cube in my stomach grew. There were regular payments to Dr. Vance's personal account. The amounts were astronomical, and the description simply read, "Consulting services." What kind of consulting costs $10,000 a month? I dug deeper. At the back of the folder, I found 2 different reports held together with a paperclip. They were dated the same day as the accident, 7 years ago. The first report was the one we had known about for years. L3, L4 spinal cord injury, permanent paralysis. It bore Dr. Vance's signature. The second report was crumpled, as if someone had intended to throw it away, but changed their mind. This was the original printout from the radiology department. When I read the diagnosis section, my eyes went dark. Severe contusion and edema in the lumbar region. Spinal cord integrity preserved. Full recovery expected within 6 months with physical therapy. I covered my mouth with my hand. I struggled to keep from screaming. 7 years. For 7 whole years, my son's ability to walk had been stolen from him. Not by a disease, but by a scenario that had condemned him to that chair. And the one responsible was the woman who slept beside me every night. Why? I couldn't find the answer to that question, but my anger was beginning to suppress my fear. I took photos of the documents and put everything back exactly where it belonged. I locked the cabinet and hid the key. As I left the room, the parquet floor creaked. I saw a shadow at the end of the corridor. Elena? No, it was just a coat rack. But that fear was enough for me. When I returned to the bedroom, I didn't dare look Elena in the face. She was no longer my wife, but my son's executioner. In the morning, I went down to the kitchen, dizzy with exhaustion from not sleeping all night. Elena was drinking her coffee. She smiled when she saw me, but now I could see the teeth beneath that smile. "You're early," she said. "Dr. Thorne sent a message," I said, making a superhuman effort to keep my voice natural. "Leo's blood values are low, and he needs to give blood again in the morning on an empty stomach. Elena's eyebrows shot up. Again? Why didn't they take it yesterday? I think there's been a mix-up in the lab. That's the procedure. I turned away and grabbed a glass from the cupboard. I didn't want her to notice I was averting my eyes. I'll come too, Elena said, pushing her chair back. I can postpone my meeting. Right then, panic seized me. No need, honey, I said immediately. Your board meeting is very important. You've been preparing for it for months. We'll be right back. I won't tire Leo out. Elena paused. She sized me up. At that moment, our fate hung by a thread. Then she looked at her watch. You're right. I can't miss that presentation. But call me as soon as you're done. I promise, I said. A promise I wouldn't keep. My hands were shaking as I woke Leo up and got him ready. But this time it wasn't from fear. It was from haste. Dad, why so early? Leo asked, rubbing his eyes. Let's call it a surprise trip, I whispered. Just trust me, Leo. Don't ask questions. Just trust me. As we got in the car and pulled out of the garage, I glanced back at the house one last time in the rearview mirror. That gray, gloomy building wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene, and I had rescued my most precious possession from that wreckage. Now it was time to settle the score. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, the sun hadn't risen yet. The sky had turned a leaden gray, a harbinger of the approaching storm. I turned off the engine, but my hands didn't want to leave the steering wheel. This was the place we had come to for years, thinking we were healing my son, but in reality we were making him sick. Now we were entering the same building to save him. The irony of fate left a bitter taste in my throat. Leo looked at me. Dad, he said, his voice trembling. Why are we here? Is it really for a blood test? I turned to him and put my hand on his shoulder. Seeing the innocence in the depths of his eyes hurt me. No, Leo, I said honestly. I learned some things last night. And today, here, we will get answers that will change our lives. Just trust me. I took the wheelchair out of the trunk. This metal contraption had been my son's legs for 7 years. But now, looking at it, I saw only a shackle. I sat Leo in the chair and headed for the elevator. Dr. Thorne was waiting for us. When we entered his office, the lines of fatigue on the doctor's face had deepened, but his eyes shone with determination. He didn't act as if he hadn't been expecting us. Instead, he nodded his head as if completing a chess move. I knew you were coming, Arthur, he said, locking the door behind us. And it was wise of you to come alone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and showed him the photos I had taken that night. You were right, I said, trying to control the anger in my voice. The original reports, the payments made to Dr. Vance, it's all here. Dr. Thorne examined the images, his expression hardening. This is more organized than I thought, he muttered. Then he turned to Leo. Leo, there are adult matters we need to discuss with your father. But first, we need to clarify a truth about you. Leo looked at me fearfully. Am I dying? No, son, said Dr. Thorne, with surprising tenderness. Quite the opposite. You need to start living. The doctor stepped back from his desk. Leo, I want you to try something. I know it will sound impossible, but trust me. Release the brakes on that chair and try to stand up. The room fell silent. Leo's eyes widened. I can't, he whispered. My legs, they don't work. My mom says if I fall, my spinal cord will snap. Your mom was wrong, I interjected, unable to keep my voice from cracking. The doctor was wrong too. We want you to try, Leo. Just try. Leo gripped the arms of the chair with trembling hands. The expression on his face was a battlefield of fear and hope. He took a deep breath. He stretched his arms, pushed his body forward. His legs were shaking. Years of inactivity had weakened his muscles, but they held. Slowly, inch by inch, he rose. His feet touched the floor. And there he was, my son, my 18-year-old son, standing on his own 2 feet. Even though he staggered, even though his knees trembled, he stood. "Dad," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I can feel it. I can feel the texture of the carpet under my feet." Tears streaming down my cheeks, I fought hard not to hug him. If I hugged him now, he might fall. "See," I said, trying to smile. "You're strong, Leo. Much stronger than you think." Dr. Thorne immediately came over to support him and gently helped him sit back down. "Your muscles are weak, Leo. That's normal. But there's no neurological impairment. With intensive physical therapy, you could even be running in a few months." Leo slumped back into the chair, a bewildered smile on his face. But then that smile faded. What about my mom? Why did she lie to me? Why did she lock me in this chair? That was the hardest question to answer. Dr. Thorne looked at me. "We need help to figure this out, Arthur. Detective Reynolds, my contact at the police, is on his way. This may be deeper than we thought. Your wife isn't doing this just for the money. What else was in that folder?" "A letter," I said, remembering. I couldn't read it all, but it was dated a long time ago. And it was signed Uncle Walter. Arthur's face turned ashen. Walter. His father's estranged brother, the black sheep of the family. Walter? What business could he have with Elena? "We'll find out," said Dr. Thorne. "But for now, Leo must stay here in the hospital. I've activated the security protocol. Elena can't get in here. As for you," he paused, "you need to go home and keep playing that role, Arthur. Until Reynolds arrives, you must keep Elena occupied without arousing suspicion and find the original letter. If Walter is involved, this isn't just medical fraud. It's a planned revenge against your family." I looked at Leo. Leaving him here, returning to the wolf's den. Every cell in my body rebelled against it. But I had to do it for my son's freedom. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll go back to that house and smile at that woman until the handcuffs are on her wrists." Dr. Thorne put his hand on my shoulder. "Be careful, Arthur. A cornered man is the most dangerous." There was a knock at the door. A tall man in a trench coat entered. Detective Reynolds. The game was on. The drive home was the longest drive of my life. My hands on the wheel no longer trembled. Instead, they were stiff as a board, as if they would break the steering wheel. That asphalt road between the hospital and home was now, for me, the thin line between a father and an avenger. When I parked the car in the garage, I didn't turn off the engine right away. I took a deep breath. The air filling my lungs smelled like gunpowder. Arthur Pendelton was no longer that quiet, resigned husband. I was an agent, and my mission was to take back the life stolen from my son. The silence that greeted me when I entered the house was different from previous nights. It no longer felt threatening, but fragile, because I knew its secret. I headed straight for Elena's study. There was no hesitation in my steps. The cowardly man from that morning had died in the hospital room when he saw his son take his first steps. I opened the door to the study. The expensive perfume scent permeating the room made me nauseous. My time was limited. Elena could call any moment, or even come home. I opened the third drawer, found the key under the fake invoices, and headed for the filing cabinet. The blue folder was there. When I grabbed it with my hands, I felt like I was holding a live bomb. I opened the folder on the table and took out the letter bearing Uncle Walter's signature. I had only glanced at it the night before. Now I had to read it word for word. "Dear Elena," it began, in that elegant but sharp handwriting. "I spoke with Vance. Don't worry about the payments. The funds will be transferred from the Cayman account. The important thing is to keep the child stable. Any sign of recovery would be disastrous for us. When my father Raphael betrayed me by leaving the inheritance to Arthur, he didn't know he was sealing the fate of this empire with his own hands. Arthur is weak, incapable of ruling. But that child, if Leo grows up and inherits it, my share will be lost forever. You must keep him in that chair, in that house like a plant. As he weakens, the guardianship and control will pass to us. Be patient. Just a few more years. Then we'll watch Arthur's collapse along with his miserable garage dreams." Signed, Walter. As I read the letter, I felt the blood freeze in my veins. This wasn't just about money. It was a poisoned arrow from my father's past, and they had put my son in the crosshairs. Elena had conspired with my husband's brother to sacrifice her own son. I cringed in disgust. I folded the letter and placed it in my coat's inner pocket, over my heart. This piece of paper would be their undoing. Just then, I heard the front door open. Panic washed over me like a cold wave. Elena wouldn't be home at this hour. She never would be. I quickly put the file back, locked the cabinet, and threw the key into the drawer. But as I closed the drawer, my hand slipped, and the crystal pen holder on the desk fell to the floor. Clang! The sound echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. "Arthur?" Elena's voice came from the hallway. It was suspicious, sharp, and close. I took a deep breath. "Stay calm. You're an actor, and this is your biggest role." I bent down and started picking up the broken pieces. When Elena appeared at the door, I turned to her with the glass shards in my hand. "Ah, you're here?" I said, hoping she would attribute the tremor in my voice to clumsy embarrassment. "I was looking for a bill. My hand slipped." Elena leaned against the doorframe, watching me. She looked like a statue in her gray business suit. But her eyes, those eyes scanned every corner of the room. "Which bill?" she asked, her voice cold as ice. "The electricity bill," I said, straightening up. "I couldn't remember if we paid last month's." "Arthur handles the automatic payments. He's been doing it for years," he said, taking a step into the room. His gaze fell on the slightly shifted pile of files on the desk. "Where'd Leo? I saw the car in the garage, but his wheelchair isn't there." There it was, the question. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. "He's at the hospital," I said flatly. "His blood values. Dr. Thorne wanted to keep him under observation for a few hours. They're going to put him on an IV." The muscles in Elena's face tensed. She walked towards me, only a table between us. "Dr. Thorne? I just called the hospital, Arthur. There's no one named Dr. Thorne working at the switchboard, and Dr. Vance's secretary said Leo's file wasn't opened today." I was caught. My lie was stabbing me in the foot like shards of glass. Elena leaned over the table, her face very close to mine. That familiar perfume now smelled like poison. "Where is my son, Arthur? And what are you up to?" I didn't back down. The weight of the letter in my coat pocket gave me strength. "Maybe," I said, looking her straight in the eye for the first time. Maybe it's my turn to ask the questions now, Elena. Like why Dr. Vance doesn't want Leo to get better. Elena's color drained. Her pupils shrank. For a moment that cold mask fell away, and I saw the pure fear beneath. But it lasted only a second. She quickly reached into her pocket. She was pulling out her phone. "Who are you calling?" I asked, my voice hardening. "Walter," she said, not realizing she'd let it slip. Then she paused, her eyes widening in horror. "Uncle Walter?" I finished her sentence. "The one we haven't seen in years, my father's traitorous brother Walter?" "You're a stupid man, Arthur," she whispered. "You always have been. Just a simple repairman. You never understood the big game." "You're a stupid man, Arthur," she said. The venomous contempt in her voice sucked the oxygen out of the room. Once that sentence would have crushed me. It would have made me feel inadequate, small, and helpless. But now those words sounded like nothing more than the desperate floundering of an enemy. The presence of that letter in my coat pocket had become my armor. "Maybe you're right, Elena," I said, my calm voice surprising her. "Maybe I am a simple man. But this simple man just sent Detective Reynolds the location of the house. And right now, can you hear the sirens breaking the silence outside?" The mocking smile on Elena's face froze. She tilted her head slightly to the side and listened to that distant, high-pitched sound seeping through the window. The horror in her eyes spread slowly, like an ink drop dispersing in water. "The police?" she whispered. Her voice trembled. You reported your own wife?" "I didn't report my wife," I said, taking a step toward her. "I reported a monster who stole my son's life, who used him like a pawn for his own greed and revenge for the past." Elena staggered for a moment, as if she had been struck by an invisible blow. But she quickly recovered. She was a master of survival. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for an escape route. She reached for the phone on the table, but I beat her to it and grabbed it. "Walter can't save you, Elena. That letter, Walter's instructions to you, they'll all be in the hands of the police." Just then, the front door was pounded on. "Police! Open the door!" Elena looked at me. There was no anger in that look now, just pure pleading. "Arthur, listen," she said quickly, approaching me. She put her hand on my arm, that familiar touch now burning my skin. "We can fix this. Walter forced me. He threatened me. We had no money, Arthur. We were going under. Your obsession with that garage was driving us to bankruptcy. I was just trying to save our family. I did everything for Leo, for us." "Don't lie," I shouted, pulling my arm away forcefully. "Leo could have walked. 7 years. For 7 years, you looked that child in the eye and told him he was crippled. This wasn't for us. This was for your sick ambition." The door burst open with a crash. Heavy boots echoed down the hallway. "Hands up! Stay where you are!" Detective Reynolds burst into the room with 2 uniformed officers. His gun was aimed not at Elena, but at the threat in the room. Seeing Elena, he lowered his gun but didn't break his stance. "Elena Pendelton?" Reynolds asked, his voice like a verdict. Elena straightened her posture. She smoothed her hair, buttoned her jacket. The broken woman was gone, replaced by the Ice Queen. "It's me," she said coldly. "And may I ask the reason for this barbaric raid?" "You are under arrest for aggravated abuse of your son Leo Pendelton, forgery, and conspiracy," said Reynolds, removing the handcuffs from his belt. The officers approached Elena and cuffed her hands behind her back. The cold click of metal echoed in the office. To me, that sound was the sound of freedom. Elena didn't resist. She just turned her head and looked at me. That last look, there was no remorse in it, only pure hatred and contempt. "You'll pay for this, Arthur," she said as they led me past her. "Your Uncle Walter won't let this go. You and your crippled son will be out on the street." "My son isn't disabled," I said behind him, clenching my fists so my voice wouldn't tremble. "He'll walk, and we'll be happier than you could ever be." They took him outside. The red and blue lights of the sirens danced on the living room walls. Reynolds came over to me. "Are you okay, Mr. Pendleton?" "I don't know," I said honestly. I guess I'm just breathing." "The letter?" he asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out that poisonous piece of paper. "Here, Walter's instructions." Reynolds nodded as he placed the letter in the evidence bag. "This isn't over, Arthur. Walter Pendleton is a powerful man. But with this letter and Dr. Thorne's reports, we'll bring his empire crashing down." When the police and Elena left, the house fell silent again. But this time the silence was different. That heavy, stifling air, full of secrets, was gone. In its place came the clear, clean air that follows a storm. I collapsed onto the sofa in the living room. My hands were shaking. I had just sent my wife of 20 years to prison. Part of me was grieving, yes, for the woman I loved, or thought I loved. But the other part was at the hospital with my son who was standing on his own 2 feet. My phone rang. "Dr. Thorne." "Arthur? Is it over?" "It's over," I said, finally allowing my tears to flow freely. "They took him." "Leo is asking for you," said the doctor, his voice soft, "and he has a surprise for you." "I'm coming," I said. "I'll be right there." I locked the door behind me as I left the house. But this time I didn't put the key under the doormat. I threw that key into the deep waters of the decorative pond in the garden. That house, those memories, those lies, they were all behind me now. I looked up at the sky as I got into the car. The clouds were dispersing, and a faint sun was appearing in the gray Seattle sky. I started the engine. My destination was the hospital. My destination was our new life. The roads leading to the hospital had shed their morning gloom. The sun was peeking through the clouds, creating glints on the wet asphalt. But the storm inside me had not completely subsided. That last look on Elena's face as she was arrested, that pure hatred, was lurking in the dark corners of my mind. "Walter won't let it go," she had said. Was this threat merely the ranting of an angry woman, or was it a declaration of impending war? When I entered the hospital parking lot, I pushed these thoughts aside. Right now, there was only Leo. As I took the elevator up, Dr. Thorne's words, "He has a surprise for you," echoed in my ears. Stepping into the corridor, I saw 2 police officers waiting outside Leo's room. Detective Reynolds had kept his word and increased security. This sight both reassured me and once again brought home the seriousness of the situation. I opened the door and froze. The room was empty. The bed had been made. The wheelchair stood in the corner like an abandoned statue. Panic gripped my throat. "Leo?" I called out, my voice trembling. "I'm here, Dad." The voice came from the other side of the room, from the floor-to-ceiling windows. When I turned there, I was met with a sight I will never forget for the rest of my life. Leo was standing, holding onto the parallel bars in front of the window. A physical therapist was beside him, but not touching him. Leo was supporting his own weight on his own legs. His face was covered in sweat. His leg muscles were trembling. But his posture was as solid as a mountain. Oh my God. The whisper escaped my lips. My bag slipped from my hand and fell to the floor, but I didn't even hear the sound. Leo turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears, but this time not from pain, but from triumph. "Look, Dad," he said, breathless. "The view looks very different from here." I ran towards him, but was afraid to touch him, as if my touch would break the spell. "Son," I said, kneeling before him. You're doing it." "Dr. Thorne was right," Leo said, finding the courage to take a step. He lifted his right foot, trembled, but planted it firmly on the ground. "My legs are weak, but they're mine. I can feel them, Dad. I can feel the ground." I stood up and hugged him. The weight on my shoulders vanished when his arms wrapped around my neck. My son, whom I had hugged leaning over his wheelchair for years, was now at eye level with me alone. I couldn't hold back my sobs at the magnitude of this moment. "It's over," I whispered in his ear. "That chair, that prison, it's all over." "My mom," Leo said, pulling back and looking at my face. His voice was anxious. "Did they take her?" I nodded. "Yes. She can't hurt you anymore." A complex expression appeared on Leo's face. Relief, sadness, and anger. "Why, Dad?" he asked. His voice hurt. "Didn't she love me?" "She loved you, Leo, but she loved her own ambitions more," I said honestly. "Some people don't know what love is. They only know how to possess." Just then, the door opened and Dr. Thorne entered. He wore a proud smile, but his eyes held the same tension I felt when I saw the police. "I see you like the surprise, Mr. Pendelton," he said. "To call it a surprise is an understatement, Doctor. It's a miracle." "It's not a miracle, it's science and willpower," said Thorne, handing Leo a towel. "But I have to cut the celebration short, Arthur. We need to talk." While the physiotherapist helped Leo sit down, I stepped out into the corridor with Dr. Thorne. The doctor's face grew serious. "Detective Reynolds called," he said, lowering his voice. "News of Elena's arrest has leaked to the press, and more importantly, Walter Pendleton's lawyers are already involved. They're preparing a defense claiming Elena is mentally unstable and the charges are baseless." "But the letter?" I said in surprise. "We have evidence." "Walter is a powerful man, Arthur. They could claim that the letter is fake, that Elena fabricated it to cover up her own crime. Reynolds has intelligence that Walter is preparing to leave the country. If he escapes, he'll run this case from afar and make your life a living hell." A chill ran down my spine. Even though Elena was behind bars, her shadow still hung over us. "What are we going to do?" "Reynolds says we need Elena's confession to corner Walter. If Elena talks, Walter is finished. But right now, she's exercising her right to remain silent." I leaned against the wall. The war wasn't over. It had just shifted fronts. "I need to talk to her," I said suddenly. "Who? Elena?" Dr. Thorne was surprised. "That would be madness." "No, doctor," I said, a new resolve growing inside me. "I know her weak spot. Walter used her, exploited her. If Elena realizes Walter has discarded her, she'll take him with her. I need to talk to her." Dr. Thorne studied me for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I'll talk to Reynolds. But Arthur, be careful. That woman is no longer your wife. She's a wounded animal." When I returned to the room, Leo was sitting on his bed. "Bad news?" he asked, reading the expression on my face. "Just one last thing we need to finish, son," I said, kissing his forehead. "One last step to our true freedom." Leo took my hand. "I'm not scared, Dad. I'm not scared anymore." "Me neither," I said, lying. "I was scared, But that fear wouldn't stop me. On the contrary, it would make me run faster. The detention center was among those gray concrete blocks outside the city. The heavy metallic sound of the iron doors closing was powerful enough to crush a person's spirit. But I wasn't crushed, because I hadn't come here as a victim, but as an envoy. With special permission arranged by Detective Reynolds, I was taken to the lawyer's visiting room. The room was cold, the hum of the fluorescent lights breaking the silence. Across the metal table in the middle sat a woman with her hands cuffed. Elena, seeing her in an orange jumpsuit. This image was so contrary to the powerful businesswoman Elena image in my mind that for a moment my breath caught. Her hair was messy, her makeup-free face showing the weariness of years and an unconcealed fear. But when she saw me, she tried to put on that familiar mask. She stiffened her jaw, narrowed her eyes. "Did you come to see me, Arthur?" she said, her voice rough. "To celebrate your victory?" I pulled up a chair and sat across from her. There was only a cold metal table between us, but in reality, there was an abyss of distance. "There is no victory, Elena," I said calmly. "Only the work of clearing the wreckage. Leo is walking. He took his first steps today." I saw a momentary sparkle in her eyes. Regret? No. Surprise. You let him?" "Fools. His bones are like glass. They'll break." "It didn't break," I said sharply, "because bones aren't like glass. They're only as fragile as your lies, that's all." Elena laughed, a bitter, hysterical laugh. "You don't understand anything, Arthur. Walter, you don't know that man's power. He'll get me out of here. He hired the best lawyers." I took a deep breath. This was it. I reached into my pocket and placed a newspaper clipping from that morning's paper on the table, right in front of her. The headline read, "Statement from prominent businessman Walter Pendelton. I'm concerned about my sister-in-law's mental state. I have nothing to do with the allegations." Elena looked at the article. She read it. She read it again. Her hands began to tremble. The last shred of pride on her face vanished, replaced by horror. This is a lie," she whispered. "It's not a lie, Elena," I said, leaning toward her. "Walter has written you off. His lawyers are arguing that you are a pathological liar and that you acted alone to get your hands on the inheritance. Walter is about to leave the country on his private jet. While he's sipping cocktails in the Maldives, you'll be rotting away here, alone, within these four walls." Elena raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears, but these were not tears of sadness. They were the pure fury of a woman betrayed. "That bastard!" she hissed through clenched teeth. "He promised me." "I'll take care of everything," he said. "Just hold the child. Leave the rest to me." "He used you, Elena," I said ruthlessly, "just like you used Leo. But with one difference. You still have a chance. Detective Reynolds is in the next room. If you tell him about Walter's plans, the instructions he gave you, the money transfers, we can make a deal with the prosecutor." "Why?" she asked, looking at me suspiciously. "Why are you helping me, Arthur? I ruined your life." "I'm not helping you," I said, standing up. "I'm helping my son. As long as Walter is out there, Leo won't be safe. And I will never let my son look over his shoulder in fear again. I want to finish Walter, Elena. And you're the key." Elena was silent for a moment. She looked at the metal table, looked at her cuffed hands. Then she raised her head. The cold fire in her eyes now burned with a desire for revenge. "Call Reynolds," she said. Her voice no longer trembled. I'll tell him everything. I won't let Walter get on that jet. If I burn, he burns with me. I headed for the door. Detective Reynolds signaled me with his thumb through the glass. I had done it. "Arthur?" Elena called from behind me. I paused but didn't turn. "Leo!" His voice was hoarse. "Tell him. Just tell him." He couldn't finish the sentence. Maybe there was nothing left to say. "I'm teaching him to walk, Elena," I said, and walked out the door. When I stepped into the hallway, I felt tons of weight lift off my shoulders. Walter's empire was crumbling. Elena had chosen to live in her own hell. But me, I was returning to my heaven, to my son. It was evening when I returned to the hospital. When I entered Leo's room, I found him asleep. The expression on his face was so peaceful that the pain-filled lines I had seen for years had disappeared. I sat down on the chair by the window and began watching the stars. My phone vibrated. A message from Reynolds. Walter was arrested at the airport. Elena told everything. "It's over, Arthur." I hung up and took a deep breath. Yes, it was over. The chains of silence had been broken. And that night, in the dim light of the hospital room, I felt truly free for the first time in my life. 6 months later, far from Seattle's gray concrete, we are in a small house at the foot of the Cascade Mountains, where the scent of pine trees mingles with the smell of motor oil. It is not as ostentatious as that old mansion. The parquet floors do not creak. The walls do not hold secrets. It breathes. When I lifted the garage door, the morning sun poured in. The 1967 Mustang engine on the workbench gleamed like a work of art. I looked at the oil stain on my hands. Those stains I had been ashamed of and tried to hide years ago were now my badge of honor. "Is the key number 12, Dad?" I didn't flinch at the voice behind me. I no longer expected the creak of a wheelchair after that voice. I turned my head. Leo was standing there with a wrench in his hand. He still had a slight limp. Perhaps he always would. But that limp was the rhythm of his walk, not an obstacle. "Yes, son," I said, handing him the wrench. "Number 12, right in the heart." Leo leaned over the engine. His muscles tensed. A bead of sweat appeared on his forehead. The boy who 6 months ago could barely hold a glass of water without shaking was now commanding iron and steel. Physical therapy was hard, painful. There were nights when we came close to screaming, to giving up. But each time we looked at the empty seat of that wheelchair and kept going. "The trial will be over next week," Leo said, his eyes never leaving the engine. I wiped my hands with the rag in my hand. "Yes," Detective Reynolds called. "Walter's lawyers have agreed to a settlement." Elena's testimony finished him off. "What about my mom?" he asked. His voice was neutral, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly. "What will happen to her?" "Probably 15 years, I said honestly. "Maybe less for good behavior." Leo was silent for a moment. Only the sound of metal scraping against metal could be heard. Then he sat up, wiped his forehead with his oil-stained hands, and looked at me. That look no longer held the fragile child. There was a young, wise man. "Are you going to visit her?" "No," I said. I told her what I had to say. "The chapter is closed, Leo. Our story ended on that page." We finished our business and went out onto the porch. As the sun set, the sky was painted orange and purple. 2 rocking chairs, 2 cups of coffee, and silence. But this silence was no longer threatening like before. It was a peaceful symphony. "Dad," Leo said, looking out at the horizon. "Sometimes I wonder." If that accident had never happened, if Uncle Walter hadn't made that plan, would Mom, would she still love me? I mean, really love me? This was a question that kept me awake at night too, but I had found the answer. Your mother didn't know how to love, Leo, I said. She thought love was a possession, a means of control. Even if your legs had been strong, she would have found a way to shackle your soul. Some people choose to live in darkness. We chose to walk toward the light. Leo shook his head. I want to forgive her, he said suddenly. I looked at him in surprise. Forgive her? After what she did to us? Not for her sake, Dad, Leo said, looking into my eyes. For my own. If I carry hatred inside me, she still wins. She still controls me. I want to be free, completely free. My eyes filled with tears. I put my hand on his shoulder. His shoulders were hard and strong. You're stronger than me, son, I said, my voice trembling. Much stronger. Leo smiled. At that moment, the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the first star appeared. Come on, he said, standing up. Without support, standing tall. We need to start that engine tomorrow. We have a long way to go. I watched him walk away. I watched his stride. Every step was a battle won. Every step was a hammer blow breaking the chains of silence. As Arthur Pendelton, at 54, I had started my life over. Oil stains on my hands, my son by my side, and an endless road ahead of me. And for the first time, I was truly living. Subscribe to my channel. Here every week I'll continue to tell the stories of those who lose while winning, just like life. I'm Arthur, and this is my pen. Farewell to all of you. But most importantly, don't be alone.